time to get to preach. All kinds of people are in front of me. So I got a really cool story to share with everybody this morning. For years, probably about 10 years ago, some people in this room, no, Bill's not here. Some people in this church introduced me to hunting. And I just started to go out in the woods and do stuff. But you know what happens when you go out in the woods and you start hunting things? Eventually it's going to happen. You get something. And then you need to bring it home and you have this well, what do I do now moment? I've never done this before. So with that, I figured out, man, I need all kinds of stuff. So the first thing I got was a dehydrator. So I got this little, those little round dehydrators? I got one of those. And I started making jerky and stuff like that. I had always had a garden, but I always made salsa. That was probably the first thing I learned how to make. So I had a bath canner. And then I grew green beans. I'm like, oh, man, you can't do green beans in a bath canner, right? It's not recommended. So I needed a pressure canner. And then I started making more things. I started making sausage and breakfast sausage and these summer sausage and all this stuff. So I needed stuff. I needed a sausage thingy to do all that with. And then I made so much jerky. This dehydrator was not big enough. So my wife got me for Christmas one of these giant dehydrators. I'm serious. It's like a commercial grade dehydrator. But I use that stuff all the time because if you're out there hunting and stuff, and you got to do something with it. You might as well make it into a tasty treat. I learned how to make deer bacon, which is a thing, by the way. If you didn't know, it's a thing. It's a really cool thing. But I use all that stuff. And during all that time, you know what Marla was getting for Christmas? Marla was getting tools. But don't tell her I use her tools anyways. I know they're hers, but I use them because they're in our garage, so I use her tools. So smoked sausage, summer sausage, deer bacon, and then I discovered something that is right here in this package. Lovely, tasty, warm, crunchy bread. Can you smell it? Yeah, it's a little crunchy on the outside. Crunchy bread. You know what my favorite thing to do with the bread is? As soon as it comes out, I put it on the dry rack and I cut off the end of it, and I get the butter out, and I put the butter and a little garlic on there. Oh, so good. I got this. I know everybody's hungry now. I got this bread recipe online. Simple, 4 ingredients. Flour, water, salt, and yeast. That's it. And there's a couple ways to make it. It was Emma Fontanella. So it's an Italian recipe, eh? So this is how you make it. You just dump all that stuff in there. And this is kind of how they did it in the old world. They took all the ingredients, they dumped it in there, and then they just mixed it up and covered it up. And that's it. They'd go about their day. They'd go to the fields. They'd work in the vineyards, do whatever they were going to do, and then they'd come back at the end of the day, and all they'd have to do is grab this bread, punch it down, add flour, mix it up, and throw it in the oven. Then you got bread for supper, because in what Italian house is there not bread for supper? True. And there's another way to make it, but we don't really need to go into that. So I really enjoyed making the bread. But can I tell you something today? Normally when I get up here and I tell you a story, it has everything to do with the message that I'm about to preach. Everything. I mean, I'm going to come back and I'm going to hit something in the story and it's going to be like, oh, that's awesome. But you know what today is? Today's not that day. I can promise you that today the sermon has absolutely, positively zero to do with the bread. Nothing. It is definitely, for sure, not about the bread today. I know, there's even bread up there. But in our scripture today, there's bread mentioned, but again, it's not about the bread. As good as this bread is, and let me tell you, it smells really good. It smells really good. I hope you're hungry. You come to second service. As soon as I get done with this part, I'm going to give it to somebody. So I'm going to come back. As good as this bread is, it's not about the bread, at all. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 8 this morning, verses 14 through 21. If you guys will grab your Bibles, pull out your smartphone, however or you could just sit there and read it on the screen. That'd be fine too. But we're going to stand for the reading of the word today. If you guys will stand with me. Remember, it's not about the bread. The disciples had forgotten bread except for the one loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, is it because we have no bread? It's not. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them this. Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand, or are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12, they replied. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls did you pick up? 7, they answered. Do you still not understand? This is the word of God for the people of God this morning. You guys can be seated. So it's not about the bread. So starting in verse 14, the disciples had forgotten to bring bread, though, except for that one loaf they had with them in the boat. And then Jesus throws out this warning. He warned them, be careful. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of heaven. Now, it's just like Jesus to take something from our life, to take something that we understand, something that we use other day, and use it as an illustration. But you have to remember, when he does that, it is never about the thing that he's talking about. It is always about his kingdom. He's trying to use bread to illustrate something about his kingdom, and that's just the way he works. So speaking of bread or things with leaven in it, Jesus warned them about the yeast of the Pharisees. So there's a couple things that you need to know about. And one really cool thing that I had never heard of before, it makes complete sense though. Remember that the Jews celebrated Passover. So the time when they were moved out of Egypt by the hand of God, right? They celebrate that. And when they did their bread for the celebration of Passover, you know what they didn't put in it? Yeast. No yeast. I think that's where flatbread comes from. I'm not really sure. Maybe. But they did that to commemorate the time when they came out of Egypt because they didn't have time. God got them out of Egypt so quickly that they didn't have time to bake bread with yeast in it. So that's one thing you need to remember. It's a celebration for them. But think of us today. Do we eat more flatbread or do we eat more bread that has yeast in it? We eat bread with yeast in it. As a matter of fact, it's preferred. Big, fluffy loaf of bread right there. The only way to get bread that rises and fluffy like that is to put leaven in it, to put yeast in it. So for us, in our culture, that's a little bit different. For us in our culture, we think that yeast in bread is a good thing. But this is something that I learned. And N.T. Wright says this. The point that N.T. Wright makes is that over time in that culture, leaven became a sign not for something that made bread more palatable, made it better, made it rise, made it more tasty, but something that made it less pure. And in light of the scripture today, when Jesus is talking about beware of the yeast of the Pharisees, well, that makes a whole lot of more sense when you know that. So Jesus is saying, in light of his kingdom, watch out for the influence of the Pharisees and Herod. Don't let them work their way into what you're doing and make you less pure like leaven. It's a lesson that the disciples probably should have picked up on, given the culture, and some of them all had been raised as Jews, but they didn't, and that's okay. They're going to figure it out. They thought it was about the bread. They only had one loaf, but it wasn't. And we'll get back to that. For us today, maybe the best thing we can do is go back to the time when we first felt that real freedom. You know, that Exodus freedom, when God saved us from our sin. Maybe that's a little bit of what Jesus is talking about here, that we should go back and try to stay in that time when we are the most free. Remember when you first got saved? When you first realized Jesus was the Christ, that he was Lord, or more importantly, that he was your Lord? You made it personal. Well, that's a really good time. That's a really good time in your history. Really good time. We'll go on. So verse 16, they discussed this with one another and said, it is because we have no bread. Aware of this discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? And I know that it isn't recorded, but Paige and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. That must have been some kind of look on Jesus' face. What are you talking about? No bread. After everything that's happened, after everything you've seen me do, you still don't understand that it's not about the bread. And so every teacher knows this. Every math teacher knows this. After you've got done for like 6 weeks, you have just been going over and over these lessons. And at the end of the lesson, at the end of the 6 weeks, at the exact time when it should be starting to come together and people should be understanding it, then somebody opens their mouth and asks a question and lets the teacher know that they have no idea what we've been doing for the last 6 weeks. Paige showed me that look before. It's something like, how do you not understand this by now? That's the look Jesus is giving his disciples right now. It's like, have you ever had a conversation with a couple of people and you guys are talking about something very specific and then somebody comes in and says something completely unrelated to what you're saying and everybody looks at him like, that's the look that Jesus has on his face. The look of a teacher that has students that have no idea what they're saying. The look that you're having a conversation and somebody butts in and they have no idea what you're talking about and they talk anyways. It's crazy. So another example. So I used to teach ropes class, right? In a complete other lifetime. So I used to teach everything about ropes, tying knots, tying bowline knots, the fact that you should be able to tie this knot without even really looking at it, which you can, by the way. So I used to teach people how to tie knots. It was fall protection. I'd teach them how to do high angle rescue, stuff like that. Really, really cool stuff. But it starts with the basics, right? You teach somebody the basics. You teach them how to fold it, how to turn it, all the different pieces of the rope, how to tie this knot. You show them, hey, this is a really cool bowline knot. Hey, if you tie it right, there's a little release hitch on here. You can, no matter how much weight put on there, you can always get this knot back out. And I've taught these classes before, really slow, just tying the knots, and I walk them through it, and they get it. And towards the end of the instruction, I get back, and somebody hands me this. Is this right? It's the same look. It's the exact same look that Jesus is having on his face. But it's not just a look of disgust. It's not just a look of, oh my gosh, when are they going to get it? It's also a look of urgency. I think Jesus has an urgency about him because he wants them to get it, just like he wants us to get it. He wants us to understand what he's putting down. He is trying to show them something, and he wants them to get it because he knows they're going to need this. This ministry is heading towards Jerusalem. They are going to need to be super strong in their faith if they're going to endure what is coming. And you know who else needs to know that? We do. The same thing is coming. I have no idea it's exciting, but it's scary. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow to any of us. But I know one thing. I'm going to need Jesus and what he said. I'm going to need the words that he's given me to put into my heart. I'm going to need to know his ways. I'm going to need to know his kingdom. I'm going to need to be as close to him as I possibly can, because whatever's coming, I'm going to need him for that. Here's something really important. Teachers, you won't always be there for your students. I think this is where Jesus is going. You won't always be there. There is going to come a time when you're not going to be there. You can't go solve all their equations for them, Paige. Can't do it. Kim, can't do it. You won't always be there. I couldn't go climb every single tower and check every single knot for every single tower crew to make sure I did it right. Eventually, they have to be able to do that by themselves, and that's exactly what Jesus is thinking. I have to teach these folks, my disciples. I need to make sure they get it, because if they don't, they're going to be in trouble. But fortunately, he's a good and patient teacher. Yes, that was a great place for an amen. He is a good and patient teacher, because sometimes we're dumb as a box of rocks. Just speaking from personal experience, that's all. So Jesus goes on. The second half of verse 17. Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? So this isn't just like an ordinary scolding from Jesus. It is. but it's probably one related to Jeremiah 5:21. Hear this, you foolish and senseless people who have eyes but don't see and ears but don't hear. Do you know what happens when a teacher gets frustrated? I mean, you're going to get the look, right? You already know. Parents know how to give the look. Teachers know how to give the look. You get the look when students don't get it. But what does that kick a teacher into as soon as she has figured out or he has figured out that you're not picking up what he's putting down? They go back to the beginning. They start review mode. And that's exactly what Jesus is going to do, starting in verse 19. He starts a review, starts to remind them what they've already seen, a few things anyways. And he says this, and don't you remember when I broke 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls did you pick up? And you can hear him saying, 12, Rabbi. And what about when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000? How many baskets did you pick up? 7, Rabbi. Do you still not understand? Which, of course, they didn't, but they were going to get it. Believe me, they're going to get there because you're here, so they got there. Not quite yet. Jesus knows that his disciples need to be careful who they're listening to, and that is his kingdom is going to be way different. Remember, he said, I'm the way, truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But that is way different than everybody at the time thought he was going to come, and that's a big deal. So you give the Pharisees a little bit of grace there, because Jesus did not come how they thought he was going to come, and everybody at that time was figuring that out. He was trying to teach the disciples that very same thing. So we get review time. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's point at some of the evidence that you've already seen. Feeding of the 5,000. Jesus walked on water. An explanation of where uncleanliness actually comes from. He healed the Syrophoenician woman's daughter. The deaf and the mute man, feeding of the 4,000, the parables, the parable of the sower, the lamp on the stand, the mustard seed, and you still don't know it's about the thing. It's not about the thing that I'm using to tell you about the kingdom. It's about the kingdom. So he does a review, and he's asking them to consider the evidence of the things that they have already seen and not be influenced by anything else. So I saved the yeast with the actual explanation of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Herod towards the back here. The yeast of the Pharisees. This is what he's doing. In their kingdom, they're the ones who are in charge and not Jesus. They're the keepers of the gate. They get to tell, oh, yep, they'll probably get in. Look at them tithing right there. They'll probably get in. And they want people to strictly observe the law just like they do. So if you're not doing the things that they do, walking the way that they walk, you're definitely not getting in. They're so busy trying to be perfect on the outside, though, that they have neglected their hearts, which is what Jesus is trying to tell them every time he talks to them. You are not understanding. Whitewashed tombs. Inside is empty, are some of the things that he said. They love to be able to earn it. Know anybody like that? Love to be able to earn it. Look at me. Look what I've done. Take the cool seats in the banquets and mush their faces all up when they're fasting and pray loud in front of everybody so they can hear you. And they love to have a law. Give us a law, give us a way. Surely it can't be about grace. Is there any way we might go except by following Jesus? The answer is no. Absolutely. They want to earn it. They want to prove it. That's the yeast of the Pharisees. And you know, at one time, us Nazarenes were kind of known for what we didn't do either. Remember that? And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Remember, we don't dance, we don't go to movies, and we don't hang out with anybody who does. Well, that's okay to a point. Can I say this? Jesus is calling us to a particular kind of life. It's okay. He calls it a holy life. When you're following Jesus, there are things that you are going to have to say no to. That's just the way it is. And the first thing is yourself, and then there's other things that come along with it. But what it's not okay to do is be known by who you don't love, by who you exclude, by who you think might not or should not be part of the kingdom. That's not okay. So it's okay to be a good Nazarene. You don't have to go to movies if you don't want to. You can live a holy life the way God has asked you to do it. There are things that you need to say no to, including yourself. But it is not okay, Pharisee, to be known by who you don't love and who you exclude. That's the yeast of the Pharisees. Excluding people, gatekeeping, rules without love. That's the yeast of the Pharisees. Well, what about the yeast of Herod? That God would recognize Herod's royalty. Yep, just what we need, another earthly king, just like we've always had. Perfect. In other words, he wanted to be king instead of Jesus. Political power, money, influence, palaces, princes, princesses, lineage, all that stuff would just stay the same if Jesus would just come back as mighty Jesus and kick the Romans out for us and then establish my kingdom, says Herod, then everything's going to be okay. Problem is that that's not the kind of kingdom that was coming. Jesus was bringing something completely different. Think Sermon on the Mount, different, completely different kingdom. It was not exclusive to the family of Herod. Lineage, royalty, those are the only ones that are going to be welcome in that kingdom. But that's not true. That's not the kingdom Jesus is bringing. That's not what we should be influenced by. We should be influenced by him and what he says. How about influenced by the people that Jesus ate with? What's a good example to follow? By the way, he ate with anybody. Absolutely anybody. We should too. Think about this. These are also the opposites of the yeast of Herod. Last should be first. The greatest will be the servant. What about faith? All good things. So where are we headed with this? I know we're headed to the table. Where are we headed? This is my sum up time. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Can you hear Jesus singing it to us? Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Focus your attention on him. Focus your attention on what he says. Don't be influenced by the yeast of the Pharisees. Don't be caught up in the way this world works. That's not what he wants. It's not what he wants for us. He wants better for us. He knows that if our eyes are on him and that our ears are listening to him, we'll be following him. We'll walk in his ways. We'll love people instead of exclude people. We'll help people instead of hurt people. We'll give people the truth in love. And remember, you can say the right thing the wrong way. We'll be much more like him than we are right now. That's what he wants. That's what he wants for all of us. Jesus has come to open eyes and open ears to his kingdom and his ways. And good thing for us, he is a great and patient teacher, loving and kind, and showing us this new way. I know that you are going to frustrate him sometimes. I'm going to frustrate him sometimes. We're all going to frustrate him sometimes because we're not exactly picking up what he's laying down as quickly as he might want us to. But he is patient, and he will keep reviewing. He will keep showing us and keep loving us until we get it, just like the disciples did. Beware of the influence of this world that is trying to drag your mind away from him, trying to drag your body away from the good things that he has. Go back to the time when you were completely relying on him for everything. It was hand to mouth, his word to your heart, completely and totally guided the way that he wants you to go. That's the best time. And I hope you will, because his kingdom, it's coming. It's on its way. And you can be part of it, and that will be great. You should want to be. We're in this room. If you know Jesus, you're part of it. You're already on board. And I hope you will keep with him. I hope you will not let the distractions of this world carry you away from the truth about him. We're not exclusive. We're inclusive. It's not about where you come from or who you know. It's about Jesus, his kingdom, his righteousness. Remember what he said. Anybody who calls on my name, anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Paul said that. And it brings you to the point, in light of the yeast of the Pharisees and the yeast of the Herods, is do we really believe that? When we're out in our jobs, we're out in our workplaces, when we're walking through the great city of Clarksville, do we believe that? And can you tell by the way we're there, by our actions, by the way we love, by the way we conduct ourselves, by the way we are completely willing to help anyone who needs it. And then, candle. We light the candle because we got a chance to tell somebody about him. Why are you like that, David? Jesus. He changed me forever. I'm just listening to him. I'm just following him. I am not influenced by the things of this world. I'm focused all my attention. If that's not holiness, brother, I don't know what is. A life that is completely sold out, completely won over to Jesus and his ways and what he wants. Listening to him only, cutting all the distractions out and following him with all of your heart, all your mind, all your soul. Remember that? That's good stuff right there. I hope God will give us the strength to do just that. So I saved one more lesson. One more lesson. And it's right there. It's not really about the bread either. Hate to break it to you. One of Jesus' best lessons is sitting right here on the table. One of the best reminders of him and his kingdom is right there in that bread. He meets us at this table physically and spiritually. It is a sacrament. It is something that we do, something that he has given us. And there's divine grace in this. Some folks would say it could even be salvific, because if you're coming to this table and break the bread and drink the wine, you are in essence saying that you believe that Jesus is who he says he is. Christ, Son of the living God, resurrected, alive, interceding for his people. That Jesus. And this is a reoccurring reminder of what he's done for us. That Jesus has come to establish his kingdom. And it's so much more than that. Jesus meets us here at this table. And when we come, it's good. See, normally in other kingdoms, what happens? In other kingdoms, the people sacrifice for their king. But not here. Here, the king sacrificed for his people. And that's the kind of kingdom I want to be a part of. I hope you do too.